All right, 6:40. I'm calling this October meeting of the AMSA Board of Trustees to order. We are being videotaped. We have a very full agenda tonight, so we may skip some things if we have to in order to defer to next month. So first on the agenda, we do have our guests from our auditing firm who will review our this year's audit. And then we will also have another guest, Cheryl Lauer from Fulcra Consultancy will be here, so we'll probably try to do the two of those first when she gets here. And then I'm trying to look if there's other, that we'll go through our ED report, and we will talk about the family survey. We'll talk briefly about the board self-assessment. I'm actually thinking that may be something that gets deferred. And then we'll go through each of our committee updates. We will be going into executive session to discuss litigation strategies and to consider the purchase and lease of real property, because doing so in open session would be detrimental to our position. Are there any other comments on the agenda? Anything we want to move around?
Hey, Colleen, it's Lucy. I can hardly hear you.
Okay.
It's very staticky.
Okay.
So I can hear like every third word.
Okay. That is something they were trying to get fixed today, but it sounds like that didn't happen.
They were trying to get it closer to the speakers.
Closer to that? Okay.
We'll try it.
All right. Well, we'll move it a little closer so that you can hear the auditors, hopefully.
Okay. I'll do my best to listen as much as I can.
Yep, thank you. Actually, I would like to move one thing up. Should we do the nomination, the secretary nomination up right away?
Your call. I can do that if you like.
Yeah, why don't we do that first? I think you just turned it off.
Sorry. All right. At Governance Committee, we discussed the opening. We have an opening for the secretary for the Board of Trustees, and after discussion, we'd like to nominate Raul as the secretary to fill out the remainder of the current open term.
So that would be a nomination of Raul until June of 2018, which is the remainder of Allison's term.
Correct.
Is there any discussion? If not, I should note that, yeah, Lucy is participating remotely due to geographical distance. All right, so back to this. So would you like to make the nomination?
I would like to nominate Raul as secretary for the Board of Trustees to fill out Allison's term.
Do I have
in June of 2018.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, Liz is second. All in favor? Okay.
You need a voice.
Yeah.
You need a roll call vote.
All right, we need to do roll call vote for everything because Lucy's not here. Jean?
In favor?
You have to abstain.
Yes, thank you, too.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes? Brianne?
Yes. Yes.
Lucy?
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Raul. I think this will be great. We appreciate it. And we'll work closely with you so you can fill out the remainder.
And I'm
of the
honored.
term.
Thank you.
That's great. So,
trust.
thank you. Yay. All right, so let's move to, let's do the finance and audit first, and then we'll go through the rest of our agenda. So I'll let you guys have the floor.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know how that works. And actually, we should probably, I don't know, do you want us to project?
Yeah, I don't think Tom had any email.
Oh, okay. All right, then, that's fine.
Yeah, we got everything
Okay.
in front of everybody.
No, I don't think we have anything in our packets.
Rod?
Oh, it's on the, right here.
Oh, sorry.
It was on top of the
It's
packet.
on top of the packet.
Okay, fair enough.
Got it, okay. Oh, I see.
So first off, I'm Dave Kelleher. I'm the engagement partner with AAF CPAs, and I've worked with AMSA for, I think, about 6 years now.
Nicole Riley from AFCPs. I was the audit manager on this engagement this year.
So just so everyone knows, we did have a detailed meeting with the Finance Committee last week to walk through kind of the audit in a good amount of detail. So I think we usually cover at a higher level for the full board group tonight. So everyone should have in front of them, at the front of your packet should be a fold-out document, hopefully, of key financial ratios. So this should really give you a sense of how the financials were for the year. So I'll call it a regulatory standpoint, the school did have a clean audit report for the year, really an unmodified audit report, and also no compliance findings, as each year we do need to go through and look at certain requirements that DESE needs us to do as part of the annual audit of the school. So that's good news to start. And what we've done here, and we've had something similar for the board in prior years, but we've got at least some updated data here this year, is we take 2 years of AMSA that's in this audit, in the left 2 columns, and compare you to 4 other schools that, again, they're listed anonymously as A through D here, but these are all clients of ours, and I think for everybody but D, it's a current year audit as well. So you've got about as current data as there can be, since the audits are due to be submitted next week. And then in the far right-hand column, a little bit of lagging detail here, but you've got an average, and this is of our client base, and this is about 28 schools and really families of schools that we work with. So we take an average of all of those, really all different sizes, so you can see at least a broader scope for comparison. So just in the top box, we'll just start at the top, work our way down. You've really got almost a little bit of a biography of each school. So you've got the different grades, if they're urban or suburban schools, and if they own or lease their facilities, being some of the main items. And we also have number of employees and square footage of buildings here as well. So this will just give you a little bit of a scope size for everybody. And then just in the next, it's the thin line below that, but the number of students. So AMSA's hovered just under 1,000 students the last couple of years with your cap rate at 966. And you can see the size of the other schools in the comparison here. So, probably closest in size, A's a little bit lower enrollment and D's a little bit higher. So the others are a little bit lower as well. And our average school is about 616 students. So that's just to give you a range of all the schools here. So the first item, the current ratio, this just really looks at how liquid you are as a school. And as Pauline said in her opening comments, that as you're looking at purchasing or leasing options, it's good to have significant liquidity since you haven't purchased a facility yet or taken on any significant debt. So the 6.25 you see here in the 2017 box in the left column for AMSA is saying for every dollar of liabilities you have $6.25 of current assets to pay them off. So again, in the past we've talked about maybe 2 to 1 or greater being a good liquidity ratio. And you can see in schools at the end of the school year, for the most part, they do usually have a pretty strong current ratio that in the far right on average, say about 4.1. And then you've got a mix with school C at the high point of almost 11 to 1, which that's almost unnaturally high for what we see in our client base. The next item down, the debt to equity. Again, a couple of the schools here are a little bit higher as they own their buildings. I see School A and the average of our client base both over 1 to 1. So that's saying for every dollar of equity you have, if you're greater than 1 to 1, that means you've actually got more liabilities than you have equity. So in this case, the lower the ratio, the better. So AMSA at 0.18 is saying for every dollar of equity you have 18 cents of liabilities that you owe others. Most schools, when they buy a building, that really changes a lot. So you're at a low point as you should be right now, I guess is the takeaway. I'd be scared if you were close to 1 to 1 now and talking about buying a facility. So. Then next item, just in the composition of operating revenue, just really here looking at your revenue mix, and here I like to focus on the percentages since all of the schools have different sizes and different enrollments based on their sending district's tuition. But AMSA this year with about 93% of its operating revenue from pupil tuition. So that's your money straight from DESE. DESE likes that, the higher the better, and the more of your tuition expense that can be covered by tuition, the better in their eyes. So again, that is showing very strong here and will show strong in the expense side as well. But the only thing that, you know, I always work to caution organizations and schools on is from running your business, it's good to have at least some other fundraising in there. Because again, AMSA over the years hasn't had a lot of, call them entitlement grants from the state, whether it be SPED grants or Title I or grants like that. So private fundraising can be a little bit of a challenge through the foundation. But you can see the other schools here, and just 2016 for AMSA, the difference from 93% to almost 87% last year, you had really a one-time settlement of costs with your landlord that totaled about almost $1 million. So that interest and other revenue in 2016 was much higher than it has been any other year that I've seen your results. So I'd say this year is more the norm for your revenue mix. You can see with the other schools that really school A and B, they're 94 and almost 97% tuition funded. In school C and D, which are kind of both in the Boston area generally and in urban areas, they do have a good amount more on that grants government line of what I was referring to as those entitlement grants. They at least get almost 3 to 5% of their operating revenue from those sources. And just on the expense side, so again, your operating revenues for the year in total, about $14.5 million, and about 13.5 of that was through tuition. Offsetting that, expenses for the school in the next box right below that operating revenue, you have about 13.6 million of operating expenses. So you can see the categories here, and really looking at the mix here, personnel and related, and there's notes here of just the state over the last couple of years has had this in-kind pension calculation of just having schools put a revenue and expense on their books. So that's actually taken out of these numbers to give you more of a sense of your cash spending rate. So that 13.6 million, you spend about 2/3 of your budget on personnel and related costs. So that includes your salaries, your taxes, your fringe benefits. And again, overall with most schools, we see in the 2/3 to 3/4 range usually spent on the personnel budget. So you can see, you know, I think school B is really the outlier here with 82% of their budget on personnel. The average of all our schools for last year in the far right was just under 66%. But you can see a couple of the schools, 71, 72% in that range. Unfortunately, this has been a recurring theme over the years where AMSA does pick up more of a percentage expense is in your occupancy costs, which is, I'm sure, why you're talking about buying a new facility is kind of the rent payments over the years here. So those occupancy costs represent about 16% of your operating budget. And for the most part, the biggest chunk of your operating costs, or about 2/3 of those, are your rent and related costs, which for this year was just under $1.6 million. So that is a very substantial part of your operating budget that hopefully with long-term facility plans that can get a little more in line. Because you can see, and you can see the mix of the schools that all the other schools in the comparison, the highest as a percent of their budget is school A at about 11%. And the average of our client base for last year in the far right is about 12%. So AMSA at almost 17% is a significant amount higher. The good news I'd say with all this, first right at the bottom of the box, expenses covered by tuition. The 99% here, this is, DESE actually likes to see a very high percentage coverage by tuition. So that basically means that you are getting it covered in that pupil tuition, not from outside sources. So you can see with the other schools as well that A and B actually with their pupil tuition from their sending districts actually get more than the total expenses covered. So for example, School A with 9.6 million in expenses, they have 9.9 million in tuition. So they get coverage of all their expenses. On average, across our client base, we see about 88%. So you run a little higher there, but in this case, DESE does like to see that. Right below that box on operating expenses, your changes in unrestricted net position. This is a fancy charter school way of saying your operating surplus. So for the year, that $863,000, a couple ways to look at that. That as a percentage of your operating revenue, that's about 6%. So again, that's, you know, it's a good surplus, but again, it's really within the realm of what we're seeing out there for our representative client bases. I think on average, you know, our average client base is probably closer to 4%, but that gives you some range of what you're seeing for surpluses. And last year, just right on that same line, that $1,843,000, that's the other place. I just want to mention that settlement from last year. If you back that out, you're at $877,000 of a surplus. So that really is a very similar year to fiscal 17. Just that one-time reduction of rental payments through the legal settlement. And you can see here just the other operating budgets of the school, and again, School A, I think with the tuition and the sending districts that they have, that $934,000 is about a 9% surplus on their operating budget as well. So you do see some schools mix in higher surpluses really driven by the tuition. The next box down boils things to either a per student or a per square foot ratio or cost per employee at the bottom. But again, your tuition, again, running at almost $14,000 per student this year, up from about $13,000 last year. So you did have a pretty good increase in your sending districts this year. And a couple of the comparable schools here from a tuition size, probably School A and School C are the closest. And the average column is pretty close to it, about 14,100. So, you know, overall, at 13,900 in tuition, you spend about $14,000 per student based on your enrollment for this year. And you can see that across the board. And, you know, as you look at that, Schools C and Schools D, they have the higher tuition. Those schools have higher government funding besides the tuition, and also not coincidentally spend more in expense per student. So those really all three related. So, but again, looking at your increase in tuition, generally AMSA really did increase its costs this year. And again, I did mention it before, but about $300,000 of that increase was in personnel and related costs. And just towards the bottom here, the last two items in this second to last box, your occupancy cost per square foot, $25 a square foot, and again, right now you're renting about 91,000 square feet. That, I think right now, at least in my summer client base, that's the highest I've seen per square foot. It's higher than all the comparables and significantly higher than the average over 28 schools. So, not to just beat the drum on that, but you know, that is a significant drain on the operating budget. And just this last item here, the personnel cost, the number of employees. And again, you know, mentioned at the couple minutes ago, $300,000 increase in personnel costs. On an average number of employees, you did increase by about 12 employees this year. So the average shown here, even though the dollar amount of compensation went up, your personnel costs on average went down. So that also includes health insurance and other benefits. So that's a fully loaded personnel cost. But you can see with other charter schools, and again, schools C and D are in the Boston area. And I know generally all the schools I work with, they use their sending districts as the biggest comparable for personnel costs. Those two are a little bit higher, being in the Boston area. School A and School B are both a little further outside of the Boston area, and again are $63,000 to $67,000. So AMSA kind of falls right in the middle on an average compensation base there. And again, across that wider breadth of our client base, is about $60,000 for 2016. So that just gives you a range of employees, benefits, and personnel costs there. The last item in this box here, and again, I'll boil down to a couple of key numbers. In the number of months operating expenses, really the second number up from the bottom, from a monthly operating expense, you should see, and this is on a cash flow basis, backing out the in-kind and the depreciation, your monthly run rate is about $1,120,000 fully loaded on your operating budget. If you compare that to your operating reserves, so your equity, your operating equity at the end of 2017 was that number right below it, $8,663,648. So what that represents on your current monthly run rate is about 7 3/4 months of reserves. So, I guess from a wider average in the far right column, the average of our school client base is 5 months. And again, that's a mix of schools that own their building and rent. So, this is an operating reserve number, not what's tied into your property and equipment. So honestly, at 7 3/4 months, what that shows me is you're actively going into more of an active facility hunt and looking at options. It's good that you have that reserve, because usually a lot of schools do have to put something in as they're getting a more permanent facility situation. And you can see the other schools here as well, the other 4 schools, that School B, C, and D also range from about 7.5 to a little over 9 months. And School A, more like 4.5 months. So, I think as you just look at the reserves and the equity that AMSA has, hopefully this gives a little bit more of a range of where you're at as you wrap up this fiscal year. Does anyone have any questions on the number side?
If we weren't actively looking for a facility, what would you say that ratio should be at the bottom? I think in the
If
past
you have a
it's been-
settled facility, I usually say somewhere in the 4 to 6 month range.
Okay,
So even thinking of that, you're not that far above the high end.
yeah. Okay.
And I might just turn it over to Nicole for the rest of just the items talking about the audit process. We can hopefully wrap up pretty close to on time.
Thank you. So I believe it's next in your packet. We have a letter. This letter is addressed to the board and management. This is for the board and management only. It's not for outside use. This is our communications letter, our audit communications letter, our required communications. It would outline any significant accounting policies, accounting estimates, and then if we had any disagreements with management or any issues with the audit, which we did not. Happy to say we also list in here if there were any audit adjustments. There were 2 very minimal audit adjustments. One had at the back of the packet. One had no P&L effect, and one was very, very small adjustment for payroll at year end. So this is exactly what you want to see from a board perspective. There's nothing in here, nothing negative in here, and it definitely shows that your finance team is keeping very, very good, accurate financials throughout the year, as there were no adjustments or very minimal adjustments at year end. Right behind that is are comments, observations, and recommendations on internal controls. This is what we call our management letter. This does go to DESI with the audit submission. Last year, what you saw in here, we had some compliance findings with respect to the MTRS payments and with respect to the end of year report. And we're happy to report that this year both of those items were resolved. So this is a clean management letter. It has no issues with internal controls, no significant deficiencies, material weakness, or compliance findings. So all that's in here is kind of the resolution of those two, so Desi can see what your progress was.
So the board should be grateful to Liana for her great job.
Indeed. Yes, that's what it is.
And I know some board members, I see some familiar faces around the room that they have been finding some other years, there have been significant adjustments, there have been many more comments in a management letter, so it's nice to have one with no issues. Any questions on the presentation?
No one has any questions. All right.
Thank you very much
Well,
for
there we
your time.
go.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. We look forward to seeing you next year.
Yes.
Oh, yes, we do. Yeah, we have to vote to approve. So I would entertain a motion to approve.
I'd like to make the motion to approve the
Audit
auditor's report.
I'll second it.
Oh, okay, and we need to do roll call vote.
In
Gene?
favor?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Lucy?
Yeah?
All right. Motion passes unanimously. Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. All right, there was no public comment, so let's move directly to, oh, whoops, I skipped the minutes. We should look at last month's minutes. And please look carefully at last month's minutes because we were missing a secretary, so only I looked at these minutes. So please take a moment and look at these very carefully. If there are no comments, I would entertain a motion to approve.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from 9/28.
I'll second.
Okay, Roger, who seconded? Over who? Well, Ev. Okay, Ev. That was a tie. Okay. Roll call vote. We'll start on this side.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Lucy?
Yes.
Okay, there we go. Motion passes unanimously. All right, so now we'll move on. There was no public comments, so we'll move to the faculty rep update.
Some more really good feedback from teachers, which is a great trend. I really hope it continues throughout the year. Makes it easy for me. So overall, just a couple of quotes from teachers to share, just in talking, especially with teachers who have been here for a while. One was said to me, it's weird, everything feels good, which is nice. Another said, it's amazing, I actually don't have any complaints. There's no need to complain with this administration. And lastly, the challenges I have this year have nothing to do with the administration, which is a first. So it's just so great to hear this feedback. And I know, again, the teachers who have been here for at least a few years are all just really encouraged that this has been the trend, and it is a really nice change. Recently, it is towards the end of first term, so teachers are definitely fully into their schedules and the year and everything. We've had a lot of field trips recently, so those of you who are parents, I'm sure, are familiar with these. And these field trips are great supplementary activities for the curriculum, and they're also really fun, and they also help with community building for both teachers and students. So the 6th graders recently went on their annual hike to Mount Wachusett. The 8th graders attended a stage production of To Kill a Mockingbird, which they're currently reading in class. 10th graders went to Salem to see a recreation of the Salem witch trials, which is part of their U.S. history course. And the seniors had their annual picnic. In a few weeks, the 7th graders are going to the Worcester Art Museum and Roller Kingdom for their fall field trips. They're all on the same day, so a very exciting day for them. And sadly, the 9th grade trip has been rescheduled several times at this point due to weather. So they usually go to Mount Monadnock, and they're having to reschedule that because of just getting later in the season. And these trips are all planned by teachers, so it's a great example of just their activity and their proactiveness and planning things for our students. And several of them have become traditions amongst those grades too, so it's nice to see these things being more solidified and just again adding to the overall positive community feel here. There was some feedback on the consultant. So our last board meeting was the day before we met with Fulcra Consulting for the first feedback session on the various interviews that were conducted. And so teachers spent a half day on September 29th meeting with them and attending a session that was run by them. And overwhelmingly, there was a feeling from teachers that we've done similar activities to that before, and a question of why we're continuing to do those. A lot of teachers fear that because we've done it so many times in the past, they fear it's just a repetitive of the same kind of conversations we've been having as a staff before. And in those past instances under other administrations, little was done to address the concerns shared as a group due to the priorities of whatever administration was in place at the time. And because of these past experiences, there's a genuine concern and overall feeling of skepticism that little will be done with the information gathered, making the session a waste of time. So and that's just a really just prevalent concern of teachers, and they're very anxious to see what's going to be done next with the information that was gathered through the consultant. However, teachers did reflect that the findings of the consultant seemed to be accurate when they were shared out with the whole group. And on one level, it was good to see that everyone is more or less on the same page, and just to be more informative to everyone of what the majority of teachers do feel and what their experiences are. Teachers are also looking forward to seeing what the administration does to address the concerns that were raised. And we're thus encouraged to see a survey that Mrs. Lindsay sent out this past week that asked teachers to rank their concerns of most to least important of the 4 key issues that were identified at the session. And those issues were plagiarism, interdepartment collaboration, inconsistent policy enforcement, and teaching the whole child. And in her email, Mrs. Lindsay indicated that committees will be established to address these concerns once the results of the survey are compiled. And so looking forward, this Friday we have our second half-day professional development, and there are 2 afternoon sessions. The first is split between a session for new teachers on just a refresher on PLUS portals and study halls and kind of more everyday stuff. And then another session that will be held for returning and experienced teachers on active engagement and best practices. And then everyone will have a choice later in the afternoon to attend either a session on Google Classrooms, which is being tested out by a lot of teachers this year and very common in the broader education world, and a session that they can also choose from on successful classroom discussion. And then at the end of that, we're going to have a trauma sensitivity training. And overall, teachers are really excited to be attending professional development that has been designed by their peers and to really do or have the chance to participate in something that it can be applied to their classroom directly and immediately too. And that's it for this month. Yeah.
One question on the consultant engagement. It sounds like the feedback was not about the engagement itself, but to make sure that we do something with it, right? Is that
Exactly.
the-
Yeah,
okay.
absolutely. Yeah, I think.
That's fair.
Yeah, yeah. And I think obviously these things take time, but I do think there's a concern about just again like how much time, what's the plan moving forward, some kind of timeline for how the different issues that were identified will be addressed.
And Brianna, I heard you say policy, was it policy engagement? Oh,
Inconsistency.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what was the context of that? I didn't catch all of it.
So there are 4 issues that seemed to come up the most through the session, and so that one was more about just the everyday like uniform enforcement, like food in classrooms, and that just those kind of things that can be tough, with so many different administrations, and then also just new teachers coming in too. So just to get everyone on the same page.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Does anyone else have questions for Brianna? No? No? No questions? I just realized that for some reason all the men on the board are sitting on that side and all the women are on this side. That's really odd. I just noticed that.
Middle school dance.
Yeah, that's how did that happen? We should probably mix this away.
I'm on this side.
Okay. No, I'm not.
Is it open?
Apparently you should sit on
You
that
wanna
side.
come
Yeah, we got an open chair.
That's really, I think it just happened that way. It's okay. Yeah, normally Lucy sits on, and Allison used to sit on that side, so that's why it was just, okay. We'll have to move the speakerphone over that way, so that Lucy's on that side. All right, Jill, parent rep update.
I don't have much. Again, I had a few meetings or interactions with parents, not really board-related questions, so I referred them to the physics department or the athletics director. But I do have an email from one parent that I was just going to read. Hi, Jill. I am not sure if I'm going to be able to make the meeting tonight, but I was wondering if you could bring up our amazing athletics program and ask if the board is considering the future of our athletic program when making decisions about possible relocation of the school. Parents have been concerned about the costs associated with participating in sports at AMSA, and in some cases are finding it almost out of reach to participate when multiple children are involved. I realize this may have something to do with the cost associated with 4 Kicks, and just want to make sure this is one of the many priorities when making future plans. Our athletics program has been a game changer for so many students at AMSA, and I would love for that to continue. So I relayed to this parent that I would definitely bring those concerns tonight. I noted that in addition to 4 Kicks, costs associated with athletics include the equipment and the refs and the transportation and salaries, etc. And I also mentioned that the sports programs are subsidized by the school, so don't think that the fees are, covering everything. Right, they are subsidized, and that the board and administration do agree that sports are very important and that we will keep that in mind when we're looking towards the future. So, and I did mention the financial assistance policy that we approved recently that did incorporate the new program for students that are on the free or reduced lunch, the 100% scholarship for their sport. So I mentioned those things in the follow-up email, and I just wanted to make sure everybody heard how sports are a very important part of the AMSA experience.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah.
That's all.
Okay, good. All right. Let's go through the ED report, and then we'll turn to strategic planning.
Okay, thank you. So I have a timer here, so I'll stick to my 15 minutes. The reports get longer and longer, so
We don't have time keeping.
I'll be on time. So thanks to everybody for attending, and thanks to everybody for a very successful Spirit Week that we recently concluded on Friday the 13th with the annual tug of war and the screaming contest. Both events, it's not rigged, but every year it seems that the seniors win every time. So congratulations to the
They're
class of
bigger.
2018. The juniors think it's rigged. And I also want to continue to express my sincere thanks and appreciation to the entire staff, teachers, counselors, administrators, support staff. Folks like me come and go, but it's these folks who really make the difference each and every day in our school. They are the holders of our flame, the keepers of our core value, the belief that every student, regardless of background and regardless of ability, can excel in all subjects at our school. So each day, I don't say it enough, but I want to thank everybody. So I have 6 updates. So the first one are the high school MCAS scores from this past spring. They were very strong. So you can see in ELA, 80% of our students scored advanced, 20% were proficient. 95% of our students scored advanced in math. Incredibly strong number. 4% were proficient and 1% were in need improvement. And in biology, 97% of our students scored advanced or proficient. So those results, and you can see them in table 1, 2. The results are very impressive. Our ranking is at the top of the state, and they reflect the dedication and hard work of our students as well as our teachers, and the really terrific efforts of our department chairs, Alex Waldron in ELA, Luba Schmidt in math, and Dr. Dre in science. Update number 2, the lower school MCAS score. So here's something new. Many of you may have been reading about the next generation MCAS test. So for grades 6 to 8, our scores are based on what the Department of Education calls the next generation MCAS. It has some new things to it. So one of the new things to the next generation MCAS is the scoring system. The scoring system is based upon a 440 to 560 point scale, and there are 4 categories. They changed the name of the categories, as you can see there. We do want to be cautious, and the Department of Education has been very, very clear. The acting commissioner, Jeff Wilson, has advised all schools that the next generation MCAS is a new test with a very different approach to assessing student performance in grades 3 through 8, so that this year's results shouldn't be compared to last year's results. And the Secretary of Education, James Pizer, has, if you look at the little text in footnote number 4, he has said very much the same thing. So we are being advised to be very cautious with these results and not to compare them with previous MCAS results. So be that said, as you can see in Table 2, for ELA and for math in grades 6 and 7, very similar results. About 2/3 of AMSA students met or exceeded expectations. About 1/3 or slightly less partially met expectations. In grade 8, the scores slightly increased. So in grade 8, about 87% of students exceeded or met expectations for ELA, and 75% met or exceeded expectations for the grade 8 math test. And you can see, thanks to Sarah Snow, she put together these terrific charts. You can see the actual numbers in Table 2. So because the next generation MCAS test is new, we have to be hesitant about jumping to conclusions. Be that said, that very important caveat, our math team and ELA team are already looking at the results, analyzing the results, and thinking of ways that we can further help our students. Be that said as well, that we need to be very hesitant. Our scores compare very, very well to surrounding districts and to the state. So if you look at Table 3, you can see our next generation MCAS scores in comparison to state next generation MCAS scores, and you can see the differences range from between plus 15% in grade 6 ELA to 38% higher in grade 8 ELA. And also, if you look at, I didn't write it out in a chart, but if you look at the teeny tiny text in footnote number 8, oh no, I'm sorry, footnote number 5, you'll see there's some comparison there between AMSA, Marlboro, Hudson, Clinton, and Maynard. Our scores were substantially higher than all of those surrounding districts. So need to be very cautious, not jump to conclusions, but there is some good news. Be that said, we certainly want to improve, and our math team and ELA team are very much committed to that. Update number 3. We're very happy to announce that we have just finished revising and producing a draft of our new administrative evaluation system. So we've talked quite a bit about the teacher evaluation system. Also very important to have administrative evaluation system. So we have, there's essentially 2 different administrative evaluation systems that we have. One is academically oriented for the department chairs, and one is for the dean of students, the principal, and the vice principal. Both of the systems that we have, the 2 tools that we have, were developed with a hopefully what was considered to be a very collaborative approach. We all tried to work together. Got lots of terrific, fantastic input from Mrs. Lindsay, Mr. Naraki, and all of our department heads, particularly Alex Waldron and Scott Duray, who were very helpful in revising the final document and finishing the final document. Last year, the previous executive director had started the process of putting together an administrative evaluation form, and we did look at that, but we were very intent to create a form that we thought was very school specific and also that was very AMSA specific as well. So both of the tools that we will be using are designed to support and to reinforce our core values and our 2017-2018 school goals. They are also designed to respond to some of the conditions that the Department of Education has imposed upon AMSA. One of those conditions was that the school AMSA needs to create, as you can see there at the bottom of page 12, that AMSA needs to create or select an evaluation system for school leadership. So that's what this is certainly intended to measure, or intended to correct, I should say. It's also intended to promote our professional growth in a very collegial environment. The evaluation tools have numerous benchmarks. The first benchmark, which we are just about, the first benchmark we have already met. We've created the tool. The next benchmark, which ends next week, is to hold one-on-one meetings with all administrators, and we're very, very close to accomplishing that. The purpose of those meetings is to set goals, discuss ways of achieving those goals. And then, as you can see, there's several other benchmarks. February 1st, we'll have a second meeting to review progress on meeting the goals, and then May 1st, we hope to have final drafts of evaluations due. One last note, too, both tools have 2 main sections reflective of our goals. Academic excellence, we're a very academically oriented institution, we're very proud of that, and also the promotion of school spirit. And beneath those core goals, we have several indicators. As you can see there on page 14, these indicators revolve around student assessment, student support, teacher and counselor growth, staff development and new teacher growth, scheduling, budgeting, creating a safe and supportive school environment, and really, really important collaboration. As with our teacher evaluation tool, so too this tool is a blueprint, it's a draft, it's not final. It's final for this year, but we learn as we go, and we're never wedded to any one thing, and we'll see mistakes, we'll see new ideas, we'll see things that we could do better, things that will change. So we definitely look forward to getting that feedback and to creating an even better system next year. Update number 4 relates to strategic planning. So Ms. Murphy gave a great update on that as well. So I will skip much of that part other than just 2 quick points. One is that I know Ms. Lindsay and I very much appreciated the concerns that we heard from teachers, and we're very intent upon focusing on those concerns, having these concerns inform everything that we do. And I have a list there of some of the things that we heard that teachers are very much concerned with. And I think trust and stability is very important. I think of all the issues that we heard, trust is of absolutely paramount concern. And if we have a sense of trust in our community, there's nothing that we can't do. And that is absolutely vital to Miss Lindsay and I. And then there's a list of these other concerns, very important. The high the notion of high expectations in the whole child, that they're not necessarily inconsistent. The issue of policy inconsistencies, which Ms. Murphy discussed. The desire for greater collaboration between departments, and the sense of unease that staff and families feel about the status of the buildings. So Ms. Lindsay and I are very much intent upon addressing these concerns. As Ms. Murphy mentioned, we have put out a poll last week, and we're already looking at the results, and we're looking forward to forming committees to address these issues in a very collaborative way with our teachers. Update number 5, the first family forum. We had our first family forum. I think they used to be called, excuse me, I think they used to be called Coffees with the ED. We changed the name to Family Forum. Miss Lindsay and I both very much appreciate these forums. They are just a fantastic way for us to get feedback, and how important that feedback is for us. And so there were certainly two big issues that came up. One was how parents can access club information. And so we've started to address that, as you can see there. So we've updated the club information on our website. We've linked our clubs through Plus portals, trying to make it as easy as possible for parents to access club information. The second major issue that came up for parents was the complexities that parents have accessing homework assignments. They pointed out that, and this is particularly for lower school parents and for 6th graders, that there are 3 possible places to locate homework. There are agenda books, there's Plus portals, and there's Google Classroom, which, as Ms. Murphy mentioned, a lot of teachers are using now. And they expressed concern about accessing homework assignments with teachers who do use Google Classroom. So we've worked with our teachers, and we've come up with a few things to address these concerns. We've provided a letter to parents that, actually it wasn't really Miss Lindsay and I, it was the teachers themselves who did all of this. They produced a letter to parents that clearly explains where each 6th grade teacher is posting their homework, be it Plus portals or be it Google Classroom. Mr. Finkel is in the process of producing another fantastic video. It could be 2, it could be 1, that will explain how parents can access homework. So we want to make it as easy as possible for parents to access their homework. And the third bullet point is really, really important, and this is something that a lot of teachers emphasized to us, and as an old timer and somebody who remembers AMSA in 2005, there was a strong emphasis for students to take the responsibility to use their agenda books in each and every class to write down their homework assignment. So we're a tough and demanding school, and it requires that kids meet us at least part way. And so, and I know teachers very much feel that way, I feel that way. So we want students and their parents in turn to reinforce the notion that students do need to take that responsibility to write that homework down in their agenda books. It is certainly something that I work on with my own kids in New Hampshire, not here, all the time. Last update, I've got 10 seconds, so I'm going to go a few seconds over. Ms. Murphy mentioned this. We have a PD tomorrow, and I'd just like to say 2 things. One is that really thankful for the team that put the PD tomorrow together. As you can see there, Christy J., Alex Waldron, and Tony McDonald. They worked really hard. They went into teachers' classrooms. They filmed a lot of teachers, and they put together a fantastic series of workshops tomorrow, and we're really excited about that. It's great to see organic, teacher-led professional development that we hope is really relevant for teachers. I myself, as a teacher, am really looking forward to learning more about Google Classroom, learning more about creating interactive classroom discussions. So we're really excited about that tomorrow. I'm 1 minute over. Thank you, and go Eagles.
Okay, do we have any questions or comments on this report? Oh, come on.
Great report. Yeah.
There must be something. So I have to say, I was incredibly impressed that I had heard about the Family Forum, about the clubs, these two major issues that you brought up, and then to see, I think it was this week, an alert come over my email that saying that the clubs, that there's a new way to sign up for clubs. That's just phenomenal that you heard it and it was addressed within a month.
Yeah, within weeks.
I mean, within a month of hearing that feedback from the stakeholder groups. I don't think we've ever seen that happen. I've certainly never seen that happen in 6 years being on the board. So that was just phenomenal. So I think that's great.
Miss Lindsay and I and the entire administration are very much focused on many things. One of the things is to solve problems when they emerge very quickly, and hopefully to encourage frank, open conversation and feedback, just a constant conversation with everybody in the community so that we can see what is coming. And if there is a problem, we will bust our rear ends to fix it.
Sounds good. I really like the last two workshops that are listed, the conducting interactive classroom discussions and creating engaging classroom environments. It makes me think of the, getting confused with the family survey, the faculty survey, the questions with regards to, do you have a student, is your student motivated in the classroom, is your student engaged? So to me, I think those would probably really be two good workshops.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to going and learning.
Any other comments, questions? No? Okay. Oh, also, just so you know, and this was something I asked him to put together at the last second, we do have an ideal board calendar, which actually is going to be a topic at governance committee meeting next month to talk about, when we want to see certain things. And one of the things was at the October meeting, we generally go through an enrollment and attrition report. We got the enrollment report last month, and so this, just in your packets, you have an attrition report of sort of where we've lost students and which grades and the percentages. The percentages are really low. I think this is a residual back from the days when turnover, attrition rates were like 15 or 30%, right, at certain levels. So I think that was just, it is we'll talk about it at a governance committee meeting next month on sort of what we want to, what sort of reports we want to see from the school when. But that's why this is in here. So, okay, let's move on to chair business then. So the first topic is actually to talk about strategic planning. So, and in your packets you have a proposal from Fulcrum Consultancy, which we need to discuss because we need to discuss scope of work. But one of the things, the first piece, if you recall, we had the overall proposal, and then we wanted a little more clarity over specifics and deliverables on how we would actually do this. So we broke, and our smaller group met, and we broke it into the first stage, which was, given that we felt that a huge number of the issues and the concerns, and obviously the people who live this on a day-to-day basis, were the faculty and staff at the school, that we do that stakeholder group first and use that as sort of a test case to sort of surface what all the issues are. And so I think that both Brianna and Anders have indicated, the things that sort of bubbled up out of that. And so Cheryl Lauer is here. I mean, she's here, and she's described these the proposal in 2 work streams. So I just want to clarify, right, that one of the work streams, the first work stream, is really the strategic planning piece, and that's been what the board has been focused on more. The second work stream is sort of these solution teams, which is a little bit more the issues that were surfaced, those 4 issues that Brianna mentioned, that need to be sort of resolved at the school level, because it's not really a board matter to talk about how policies are being enforced teacher to teacher. So just separate out that, and we can think about it in that way. So with that, I would like to introduce Cheryl. She is here. She's here to talk about this, and I think that, do we have a mic or
Yeah, this
something?
one right here.
Oh, is that for her? Okay. Yeah. Come. Yes, absolutely, please. So, okay. let me see. We have one person attending remotely, so she's on the phone.
Hi, Lucy. This is Cheryl.
So, let's see now. Okay.
Hi.
So would you like to start off with a question or two, or would you like me to describe what would be suggested next steps? Where would you like to start?
That's a good question. How would you guys like to think about this discussion?
I have a question.
Okay, yep.
So I
Yeah.
see your first goal is to gain consensus on what AMSA's core values are. Well, our charter sets forth those very completely. A lot of background, a lot of rationale. It's served us very well throughout the years, and I don't think we're going to change it. So what is the consensus going to do?
This was a request from the leadership, from your leadership.
Okay.
That the strategy was to, that was the way when we talked early on approaching the strategy, that it seemed like that there might be different camps or different opinions in the school, that wondering, could it be a school that has high academic standards and educates whoever walks in the door to the best of their ability? That are those in opposition or not? And so when we started to work together, that was something that came from your leadership, that we want to look at, well, what are our values? So that wasn't that wasn't from me.
So that particular topic is fairly well fleshed out in our charter.
And I think it's perhaps more the application. Like
Yeah, it's the
coming down
application. The
to-
mission is,
Yes.
but the value's not necessarily. The mission is very clear.
Okay, I just want to make
The
sure that.
interpretation of the mission, right, I think
Just
is
want to make
that
sure we're not
mission.
going to try
So
to rewrite our charter.
we are not rewriting the charter. No, we are not rewriting the mission. So that I will say is very
Very,
clearly.
very clear.
We are absolutely not rewriting the mission. That is not something that we want to do with this exercise, right?
All right, cool.
But we do want to figure out how do we apply it, right? What pieces of it? No.
And one thing, when Ms. Ryan and I were working at one point, I used to chair, for a number of years, I chaired the board at Parker, the charter school in Athens. And Pauline was saying that when she went on Parker's site, how because of the way Parker's organized, values come with that academic way of organizing, and how in some ways it made its values really help in decision making and choices about resources, et cetera. And so the idea of making, okay.
Oh.
There we go.
Is it
Okay.
on? Okay.
The idea of making the values more explicit can actually help the way an organization runs. So that was part of one of our early conversations too.
Yeah, I mean, I should say that, just to add that the sort of the team that has been working with Cheryl on this, the strategic planning team, is me and Rick and Anders and Ellen. So those were sort of things that we felt were missing. But then, yes, another goal was, okay, what are really the 3 to 5 big things? And this is strategic planning level, high level, right? This is not policy and consistent level. This is what the board and the school and leadership should be focused on for 3 years out, whatever X is, 3 years out, 5 years out. I think we started to say 5, but realized it was very hard to do that. Every time we've had these discussions in the 5-6 years I've been on the board, Roger, I'd be curious your opinion. Whenever we tried to have these discussions, you start at 5 and it's just sort of too far out there. So then we're like, okay, let's try to think about 3 years. And there are so many day-to-day issues that we end up focusing on the one. So I think we want to pull this up to go very forward-looking. So.
So if I may offer just a couple of observations. It was fun and a privilege and, neat to be able to facilitate the professional development day. That was really cool. And what was interesting was sometimes when I help organizations do strategic planning, we start off, we just jump in, set a vision, in a collaborative way. I think my approach personally is that the more collaborative it is, the more stakeholder groups you have, the better served you are, because you have made
already have more people who've helped co-create it and buy into it. So my personal opinion is that strategic planning should be as inclusive as possible. So with some clients, we start off right away with, let's set the vision. Let's have a large multi-stakeholder meeting or a different way of working. But you start by looking 3 to 5 years out. As we were talking about it, because you've had so much change in the last 3 or 4 years, we thought it was good to start with a current state assessment. And so, you know, the basic change management frame, it's embarrassingly straightforward, but where are we now? Where do we want to go? And then your strategy is how you fill the gap. So colleagues, the leadership team that I was working with thought, let's look into current state assessment, because we couldn't get over how important the faculty and staff are on this ride, and that we just need to know where people are. So we started with that, and the idea of what seemed as natural next steps. One thing was that Dr. Lewis, in our debrief, he said, you know, what we did with faculty and staff, I would love to do that with parents and have students too. And so that was, to add more current state assessment was part of this proposal. A question that I had also was, you know, is there usefulness for the board as well? You know, we didn't write that in, we didn't discuss it. But so that's why we added in more current state things. In terms of the solutions team, the idea with that was to provide on the 4 main, when we had our debrief meeting with the leadership team after, there were 4 main issues that came to the surface. And you really do want to see momentum on them. As Ms. Murphy was saying, the teachers, you know, we asked when we started off the professional development day, the first thing we asked after we shared the agenda was, what are your concerns and expectations? And we heard then, we wonder what's going to happen with this. Is stuff going to go anywhere? And when you said it again, Brianna, I thought, yeah, you know, that's exactly, what they said in the meeting as well. And so one reason we propose solutions teams are that we think it would be helpful, even if there was just one that was, you know, professionally or, you know, done by myself or my colleague. You're busy. What we're worried about is just it becoming more committee work. That, you know, and if there was a chance to have one that we did together, we think that could help really get momentum going and, you know, provide a structured problem-solving methodology. You get some wins in it. You're relieved of the administrative burden from it. So we thought that was, you know, based on our conversation when we were debriefing, that to have help with that could be useful as well. Because frankly, the way I tie it into strategic planning, and it's not improving things ultimately improves the strategy, but the way I see it tied into strategic planning is because faculty and staff, they're the ones who are basically implementing your strategic plan. Whatever vision you come up with, it's going to be faculty and staff. And you want them as on board as possible and to see that change is possible. So that might be a hybrid, if you will, to see if like we work together on one and then you move forward, you know, under other leadership. Or, you know, or I want to say Dr. Lindsay and Ms. Lewis, but now we're on first name basis, right? So Anders and Ellen, you know, ably lead them. But we think the value could be if, how can I say it? It's kind of like when you have, when you work with an outside firm, it's like you get your deliverables done. You know what I mean? It's like people know there's somebody coming in, stuff keeps moving. And sometimes when things are internal, it's harder to make things happen that way. But absolutely, it would be fine if, you know, if that's the choice you make and you guys say, you know what, we got this part. That's fine, absolutely. So let me pause there and see what questions you have, what reactions.
Yeah,
you know,
the reactions.
Especially, you know, Anders, what you were thinking.
Yeah.
So just one thought, as you were
Yeah.
mentioning on that first one, possibly working together, is there going to be sort of an infusion of an element of train the trainer? So on the succeeding ones, there might be some skill sets maybe that you transfer?
Yeah, absolutely, because what's the type of consulting I do, organization development consulting, it's very collaborative, and it's, you know, I was a Peace Corps volunteer too, you're supposed to work your that's why, what we envisioned was setting up, like creating almost a guide, 5 meetings, here's what would be covered at the 5 meetings, there's a guide that goes with it. And, and so it could be, maybe not a full-on train the trainer, or yes. You'd still have the documentation you have to do, but yes, that could absolutely be part of it.
Yeah, I think that would be a good thing.
Yeah. The other thing is that, as we decide, as you all have a preference about what is the most value that I can provide, I'm also happy, I should say, to share, like, these are just numbers in there, and I can absolutely show you how I built the budget, and as the scope changes, there would be adjustments, because otherwise it's, what is it, dartboard? It's all timing, it's all my timing. So I'm happy to share, just a full-on budget with you too, so you can see, here's where the time goes into this. What else?
Well, I just a quick comment. So we're, Ms. Lindsay and I are definitely very excited about more feedback, particularly work stream number 1, and having that feedback from kind of that same process from parents and from students. I think that would be tremendously useful. Ms. Lindsay and I are confident that the second part is something that we're very much interested in doing it ourselves within AMSA, and certainly see that as part of our roles in our positions, and we're confident. We're certainly open to suggestions and advice, but we're very confident that we can do that.
Yeah, that's fine. And in terms of the strategic planning piece, the assumption I made when I wrote the budget was that the type of methodology I was using was like a 3.5-hour, maybe a 3-hour parent meeting with students. I don't know if you can get them for 3 hours, probably 2. Yeah, and so so that would be something too, whereas, we can definitely do a second version where I can show you, here's the way I wrote the budget, and if you think 3 hours for a parent meeting is never going to fly, that changes my options for what I do, et cetera. So, what else?
Yeah, thoughts on that? I mean, I have to say that I thought, my reaction was also that I thought it was probably better to have work stream 2, to have the school at least try it first on their own. They have done a good job with a lot of, like, some of these other issues, right? Like the clubs. I mean, when things get brought up, in pulling together a team and getting to it and fixing it. And where part of what we want the organization to move to is this more collaborative, we're figuring out how to work together to solve that. I leaned towards having that be done by the school as well. But if there was a problem, they weren't able to resolve it, then okay, then we bring in someone else to sort of facilitate, but only if they get stuck. That's kind of where my thinking was on that. So. But I do want to get back to strategic, to the idea of doing the current assessments. We can either do it as, I guess we have to do it as current assessments. We haven't done that yet with other stakeholder groups, right? We haven't done it with the parent community. So I'd be very curious to hear what everyone else thinks about what are those other, if it's, we take the faculty and staff and the administration, the school personnel aside, what are those other groups that you think this would be useful for?
Could I just say something quickly on the other piece?
Okay, yeah.
So I think it's a good proposal. I'm a big fan of Kelly's, as you may know. So yeah, I work with her, Kelly. So I think we're in great hands with both of you. So one thing that works, I agree with you. I like the idea, and I think Dr. Lewis and Ms. Lindsay have created such a good environment that'd be great to see the teams go. A good process sometimes is having you there at the outset, just as a coach when people first come together to get everybody organized and say, okay, what's this process going to look like, and things like that. So you're there at the very beginning, and then just stay available. I don't know how that could work, but you could stay available if the team gets tangled up or something like that. But I think sometimes when you have intact working teams, getting an expert to be there just at the outset for the kickoff meeting and things like that could be a useful strategy.
A lot of, depending on what Dr. Lewis wanted, there could be a lot of, I would defer to what you all wanted, but there can be like a hybrid where there's, we spend an hour talking through, here's some suggestions for how you do it, et cetera. It's what you all would
Yeah,
use.
that can be a useful tool just to get everybody off on the right foot. Just put that out there as an option too.
Other thoughts on that? Okay, then can we go back to my question?
Sorry,
on
sorry,
the
I
stakeholder
just want to
groups?
put that
Yeah.
out there though
Yeah.
as a suggestion.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. Stakeholder groups, like which stakeholders do we think would be useful? Would the board like to do this in a session? Do we want to do that? I mean,
Well, I think I think I'd just sort of hold off. We got a lot of things going on with the board right now, with facilities and everything else. That maybe as for our board, I personally think priority-wise, it may not reach the bar. I was thinking I had a separate thought on the stream one is that to me, there feels like there within the students and parent bodies, there seems to be two logical groups. There's sort of like the lower school parents have one group of concerns, and then there's the upper school parents, have the concerns around getting into college and what do I do next after AMSA. And that, to me, personal opinion, that feels like a sort of a breakdown between how to organize both students and parents.
Yeah, which could be fine if that was, if there's natural groups that you see. The methodology we were leaning toward is one where you do it in what's the word, like, what was it? You do it in 12s. And so if we were doing the parents, we wanted to hopefully have 24 or 36 parents participate, and they all interview people with set questions. They all interview 2 or 3 people, try to get a big diverse group. They bring it back, we analyze it, look for themes, et cetera. And so if you all felt that naturally lower school and upper school were different, it could split nicely. That's something we could explore.
I really defer to Dr. Lewis or Brianna as for
I
some
think
more
your
logical.
point's a very good point about the different needs that upper school parents might have versus lower school parents might have. That's an excellent point.
I think whenever you split out groups, you have to ask how are they going to all learn each other's viewpoint. So for example, for future work, for visioning, I wouldn't want, I was going to say, I usually, if we had all these different groups all doing parallel visions, you still have to come together and hear each other's point of view. I think for current state, it's not such an issue. We just have to build in, how do they learn? Because, if I'm a lower school parent, or as I would say, a lower school parent, right? How do I learn the other constituents' reality? So that has to be built in.
I think it's important to have students too. I know that's the plan, but I think there's so many students that, especially probably amongst like the junior and senior class, that they've felt a lot of the changes too, and it's really impacted them. So I think to kind of validate their experience and involve them in these conversations would do wonders for them and just, help feel more connected or reconnected, I guess, to the school. Because I think there are some that have felt kind of, disenchanted to some degree over the years.
Yeah, just the act itself, I think, is the process is important, but just the act itself of reaching out to the kids and saying,
asking
"Hey,
them.
kids, your voice matters."
Yep.
I think is terrific.
Yeah. And one thing, the thing we like about this particular technique that we call pulse groups is that, let's say you have 24 students who are going to do it. They're all supposed to interview 2 or 3 people with the same questions and bring them back. So it does a lot toward saying this is a place where we can have cordial, honest conversations. This is a place where we can trust. It's that very act of the way we do it starts to increase that as well.
can you talk about how those 12 people or 12, 24, whatever, how are those groups selected?
Yes, the idea is that, let's see, so if we did students, for example, we could, if there were 24 students, I would want, I call it maximum mix of perspectives. So we could go, let's see, with students, we could go a lower school session, upper school session, or we could combine them. But we would come up with our criteria. We want gender balance. We want, diversity balance. So if you tried to get 24, as representative as you could, 24 kids as represented as you could, you have a choice culturally whether you want to advertise it and seek volunteers.
Okay, that's what I'm
You know,
asking, yeah.
like you could say, we'd
Right.
like to have volunteers, you get 40, and then we're gonna choose 24 of you
Based on
to
these,
make it.
to mix it?
Yeah. And with parents, you know, I'm sure, Jill, you know, you would have ideas about what's the way that it feels really fair and transparent. You want people also, like especially with parents, if there's people who feel disenfranchised, bring them on, you know, you want those voices at the table. So it's very much the goal is to have as many viewpoints as you can. The way to get there is to be transparent and make everybody who thought they wanted to know about it, you know, there's nothing worse than having this happen and people say, I never heard about that, I would have wanted to volunteer. Already you're doing more harm than good. So you can almost cast a wide net and then pull it down. Yeah. And we could, you know, look at to make that really specific. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think based on some of the comments that I've heard, I think we would want this to be very clear, like from the board, this is what we're doing, it's long-term strategic planning, this is what we do. We want to, you know, we've done a group with the faculty and the staff, now we want to do a group with parents. I mean, I think that would have to be very clear what the goal is, and just so it goes out to absolutely everybody, right? So and then I don't know how we figure out who, you know, we'll have to figure out how to do the logistics of it. I was just wondering about those students, because I guess the students, we wouldn't, I mean, I don't know how you select the students. You ask for volunteers, or do you just go to student government? I mean.
You could also do, sorry to cut you off, but you could also, there's another school in helping them with strategic planning, and we're, you know, finding 8 students to come to the big strategy meeting, and they did a combination of young people who are in formal leadership positions, and then arm twisting and volunteering. So it was a, you know, a combination of, if you have a judicial committee, student government, you know, the heads of that might be, you know, it could be half appointment and half volunteer.
Yeah,
Like that.
student government is great.
Because it's a big group of students.
Yeah, absolutely, and there's a lot, we have fantastic leaders in student government. I also think it's important to reach out to kids who might not
be on that team.
say a lot, and, but have a lot to say, though they may not say a lot and might be a little shy. Trying to reach out to kids like that too.
And if we also think, you know, Anders, if you think that, for example, having middle school and, lower school, upper school separate will have the younger kids talk more, that's a good reason to split.
Yeah, I think the middle school kids will have different concerns and ideas than the upper school.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think with the parents, one thing I remember we talked about in our early meetings was that, and I think it's true, it's classic, where there's your gung-ho parents, and then there's the grade outside, right? And so you want to make sure if you look for volunteers that you don't get, you know, the same people who are running everything. You know, you really want, if there's anyone who feels like on the fringe for certain reasons, or if there's people who, you know, if I live in Clinton and I speak Portuguese and I'm not that great, and I might not want to come to this, but like this kind of a meeting would be a great small meeting for me, right? So you really want people who might be outside your usual volunteer pool.
That's very interesting.
With these goals too, I'd almost be curious to reach out to maybe alumni, because I think.
Yes, that was what I wanted to ask.
Yeah.
Okay, that is a great group.
Exactly. I mean, I think even in,
Alumni group. Sorry.
oh no, that's okay.
That is good.
Oh yeah, I'm thinking even my own college experience and thinking of, when you meet people who go to other schools, sometimes you think what was either lacking in your education or what was really strong about it, and to get that perspective from them might be really enlightening.
Because certainly, I think for the future,
Yeah.
for setting a vision, alumni are definitely being wanted there, because they're especially the ones who can say, this part of AMSA, man, it's so well
Yes.
prepared.
Yeah.
You know, they're your customers 5 years out.
Are you thinking
That's
alumni
great.
students or alumni parents, or both?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, I was thinking alumni students, but alumni parents might be really interesting too.
And they might be especially good for the future part, the visioning part. You know, current state, just depending on how much energy and resources you want to put toward this, they would absolutely have perspectives. And maybe you could even fold them into parent. They wouldn't be able to tell you what's going on with AMSA now. They would be able to tell you, though, here's what we think, our graduate has gone through. But yeah, alumni parent can be a
Yeah, I was thinking, I mean, for current state, just because things have been so dynamic with the school, that staying focused primarily on our current, our current parents, our current students would be appropriate, but definitely for the future state, for both getting alumni students and alumni parents to give their thoughts would really help us set the direction.
Good idea.
I mean, I think we've always talked about wanting to try to go through this, get all of these stakeholder groups and have all of the information so that the board, rather than doing the board's assessment, because we've gone through the assessments a couple of times ourselves, to get sort of that future visioning at the January off-site. I don't know if we can do that, because it's the end of January. That is a lot to cover between now and then. I don't know how people feel about that. Is that something we want to try to do? I mean, neither Tom nor Rick are here. You know how they feel about it, because they say the same thing every time.
I'd like to defer, I'd suggest deferring a year. I think we got enough on our plate for January.
The other thing, whether, I would think there's a lot of options, there's a lot of ways to do future work. And one of the questions that, for you to answer, because I know this is what we did at Parker, by our bylaws and by our mission, the board had, in our bylaws, board was responsible for setting the mission, or not the mission, but the strategy.
Yep.
In reality, we wanted the strategy to be co-created with all the stakeholder groups. And so if it's something where, so that's a question for all of you is who gets to decide the vision? Is it you have multi-stakeholders and the board kind of rubber stamps it? Do you guys get input from all of them and you craft it? Those are the kind of questions that then determine, is it a January meeting? Is it a wider stakeholder meeting, which could still be in January when all you can do is ski, right? Which is good. So I think that's one of the questions about, not so much when it is, but who gets to decide what the vision is? How are you going to craft it? And I can share with you different ways, pros and cons, et cetera. But then that would tell you, is it something the board does in January, or is it a wider stakeholder meeting? And then when's a good time to have it?
I mean, the other thing that we could do, right, in January, historically, we have focused the January planning meeting as a very 1 year, like these are our goals, the 1 year, this is what we want to achieve. We can keep that and then use this sort of school year. I don't know that we want to defer for a whole nother year. I mean, I think we have already talked about this and deferred it all once. We tried to do this in the last January. I think we would probably, but we could do another session in like May or June, right? To sort of towards the end of the school year.
And March is great.
March, there you go.
March is a great month for big meetings because it's like mud season, right? Winter sports have ended, spring sports haven't started, but I think you have a lot of options, and definitely it's doable. You can have a strategic plan that you all vote into existence absolutely by the end of the academic year.
Yeah, we could all, I think that sort of timing makes sense to get, especially because at that point, presumably we would have a report out of the current, of all the current state assessment, and then we could start really rethinking about the strategic.
The only concern I have with that timing is that, or not, or just thinking about it, is that alumni, we kind of have to get in December, January, right? That like has to happen then, because that's just when they're here, when they're back home. So we would have to do at least the groups with the alumni, and that could be, I mean, I guess we could do the current state assessments with our students and parents, over the next 2 months, 3 months. And then we could do the alumni in that December, January time frame, probably January. And then, I don't know how we get alumni parents actually, but presumably they're living here, so, we could get them at any point too. So that's that could work, right? That puts us sort of in the spring time frame when we bring it all together.
We're also setting the budget in the spring.
Yeah.
And so I feel like if we can come out of this
before
process
the
with some
budget.
sense of directionally where we want to go, it could
That's actually
inform a
true.
budget and some places that we want to invest and spend some energy.
That's actually true. So we actually would want to try to get this done by like March.
Yeah,
So
it'll
that the
work out
budget
nicely,
can
actually.
really, that timing actually works, March, so that the budget can get approved in April. That's generally our timeframe.
I think the point you raised too around decision-making in that process
Yeah.
is probably an important one, because you don't want to have different stakeholder groups with false expectations, especially from the standpoint of, you know, is it gonna be a collaborative decision? You talked about vision. Is it gonna be consulted advised? You know, what model are we going to use? And so it's probably pretty important to get that up front stated so that everybody has a clear understanding of how their input is going to be valued and reflected.
And that would be something that, knowing that you meet on a monthly basis, if there were a smaller, like, for example, if the leadership group that Kelly and I have been working with and GovCom wanted to talk through, depending on how you organize, what would be the pros and cons of these different ways of doing strategy? Like, we could say, here's 3 different ways you can create a strategic plan, multi-stakeholder, all by March. And let's talk about, the different pros and cons of doing it different ways and levels of participation. But I think the most powerful thing really is people hearing each other's points of view. Because that's the thing with all the wonderful and good surveys that you've done. When we started working, Anders and Pauline and Ellen shared that there were all these surveys you've done over the years. And we were asked, can't we take can't that be, can we use that instead of a live meeting? But when I fill a survey out, I know what I'm thinking, but I don't know what Liz is thinking, and I don't know why she's thinking it. So the dialogue is really important. Face-to-face dialogue with people with different perspectives is really good stuff.
I agree.
I just, one other thought, as we proceed, I think it's also really important to, and it may be a difficult line sometimes to walk, how we contextualize this process within the context of the goals enunciated in the charter, which I say at every board meeting about how all students of all backgrounds and all abilities will excel in all subjects. And the other part I always love to reference is how the advanced means that every student can learn at an advanced level. Those are the things that I think are really what has attracted me to AMSA, and I think are our guiding lights, which I hope never change. And so I think it's important that as we proceed that we contextualize what we do within that context of what has, I think, always been the great defining purpose of our school.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I'm concerned when you say who decides the vision. The vision has been decided.
Yeah, well,
I just thought I'd mention that.
So then,
I'm very concerned when you say that.
Okay, so it's a matter of definition then, because and I'm glad you asked that, because the way I use the term is the mission is what you're in business to do. So if you were to see Parker's mission on the wall, Marlboro High School's mission on the wall, your mission on the wall, and Starbucks' mission on the wall, without knowing which organization was which, you should be able to figure out who's who. The way I use vision is where a place wants to be at a point in time. So in the future. So your vision, your 3-year vision might be, who knows? You guys have a better idea than I do. But to me, the way I use vision means it's at some point in your future, this is what we want to be. This is what we're going to be like. Our mission hasn't changed, but in 2020 and 2025, it's a different world, different students, different needs. So what does AMSA, what are you doing differently? What are you doing the same? So that's how I use vision.
So the way that I think about it
Yeah.
is, when the time is right, I want to talk about maybe becoming a digital leader, right? So you start to think
I was
about
just gonna say the
what does
technology,
digital mean, and how
the
do we,
external.
if folks agreed on that, what does that really look like in terms of what's happening in the classroom and how we operate and things like that. And so I think you're not alone in this, but I think the way I would reconcile that is there's probably a series of things like that we would agree on, and then we just want to make sure that we're supporting the charter. But if we were writing the charter for 2020 or 2022, it wouldn't be a whole departure from where we've been. It'd just be a different way of supporting that. That's how I would think about it.
Mr. Pettinelli, does that, the way I explain vision, does that, how can I say? Because the way I explain vision, is that similar or different to how
Well,
you saw it?
I'm just concerned that an expectation of the community may be, everything's up in the air, let's figure out what we should be doing.
Yeah, we should
what
make
our
that
vision
very
is,
clear,
what
yeah.
our core values are.
Yeah.
And that isn't.
That's not at
where
all.
we're at.
That's not what we're
Okay?
asking,
No.
yeah.
All of those things are determined. Now, how we get there is
How we
a
get
big
there.
question.
Yeah.
Okay, but I just want to make sure that the way you express it to the community doesn't get interpreted as, we're throwing everything up in the air.
Yes.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point.
Because it's very much, what's the world going to be like, and, how can you best serve your students and fulfill your mission? What's it going to take to fulfill your mission and best serve your students a certain number of years out? No one can predict what it's going to be like, but knowing as much as you can. So, yeah, but you're right, the charter doesn't change, the mission doesn't change. It's just, how do you do it based on a future you don't know yet?
Yeah, that's really why I raised the question around making sure we have alignment on the decision model. Because if we already have some things in place, we don't want people thinking, that all of a sudden, oh, no, we can influence that or we can change that, because some things have already been decided.
Are there other comments or questions? I also want to say that by proposing the solutions teams, it was something we talked about, but I want to say that Kelly and I both have, I think the world of Dr. Lewis and Ms. Lindsay. So by proposing it, it was not saying like, you can't do this internally. It was something we talked about and heard at the debrief. And so we proposed something, but obviously you guys are skilled leaders. It's not at all how can I say, it's not at all an indication of any lack of confidence. We think the world of you guys. And it was more, if you're really busy, if you want, this could be something that, you get, that we help you with. So, but I want to make sure that's really clear.
All right, good. No, I think this was a great discussion. I'm sorry that Rick missed it. Rick has a family medical emergency, because we'll debrief with a smaller group on how to do this. But I think it is clear that we'll do sort of the, what I heard, right, was we'll do a student, a parent for current assessment, we'll do alumni parents for sort of future state, and we'll try to get those four, groups over the next couple of months. And then as a board, we'll try to figure out that, once we get that information, and they know that that'll be coming through the, months, and we'll be able to report back on that each month where we are.
And Colleen, I think it is possible to, in parallel, explore the methodology that we end up using for creating a vision. For
Okay.
doing that can happen in parallel. just
Okay.
Regardless of what comes out of the current state assessment.
All right, yeah, we
Because
can
there's,
think of that.
3 or 4 different
Ways
that
to do
it's
it.
High engagement, et cetera, et cetera. And so that would be something that could be done in tandem, so
Yeah.
that when we're done with the current state assessments, you even get especially March is not that far away.
Right, it really isn't that far away, the methodology is the thing. I mean, if anyone else wants to join this team, if you want your input, that's fine. I mean, so I just want to leave that out there too. It doesn't have to be, it's just this group. It's just, that's been the group that's been working so far. But if other people have interest, so I'll throw that, let me know.
Thank you for the
Okay,
opportunity.
great.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. That's great. All right. So we're a little behind, but that's okay. We're not going to cut you short, Mike, because we all did our homework, right?
We did.
Did
My
everyone
goodness.
do it?
Did you ever?
Okay.
Created extra work for me, everybody. Do you want me to go?
Yes, so
All right.
absolutely. Can we put it up?
Should we
Yeah.
bring up the slides? So here, I'll start with 2 observations as we bring the slides up. So the first is, and you alluded to it, so yeah, just about everybody replied. The board is passionate about this. So the assignment was to identify 4 or 5 questions that we wanted to highlight and start to focus, maybe measure going into next year. Some folks did that. A lot of folks sent along a lot of commentary, and so people would. Some folks were writing new questions. Some individuals chose to spend their energy in the comments and just writing some general feedback about things. So So it was fun to do it, and it's great to be part of a team.
So
that,
you're saying we
that-
didn't do our homework?
No, but yes, you did. But it's fun to be part of a team that cares so much, and so that's a real positive. I think so. The first piece is that. The second piece is that we did not reach consensus really as a board. It's it's that peanut butter thing where even though there's not our starting point was not a huge set of questions. Just about every question was kind of chosen as an area of focus. And so let me take you through, I did create a couple slides in the end. I started to write a report and just there's too much stuff. So I created a couple slides in the end. One is...
Roger, do you know how to get to the stuff? We need to get to today's meeting, and I don't know why it's not showing up under next meeting because it's today. So...
So I'll just wait a sec till these come up.
get these
It'll help.
Meetings should be, there's today's meeting. 26th, yep. If you double click on it.
It's just slow. Okay.
And there are all our documents, yep.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yep.
Family
In the
Family survey, yeah. There it is.
Nope, keep going, it's up.
Up, a little more right there.
Right there.
Yes.
Oh, it's downloaded.
Okay, now it's down below.
You get to see
Now
my
you gotta
great
click on it.
PowerPoint template that I found.
I
Let's
saw,
see.
it was very futuristic.
Wasn't that? I tried to find something that felt like STEM. So let's see if I can dazzle the crowd with what's about to
I
come up
thought it
here.
was Mickey Mousey.
I don't, you know.
I was a little concerned about that.
All right. So there we are. All right. So yeah, if you put a PowerPoint, I'll take it from here. Nice. All right. So I created a couple slides. So the first two slides are the slides that have the majority of the questions where there was some alignment. And at the end of the day, there's a subset of questions where we had 4 individuals aligned on questions. We had some questions where 3 individuals aligned on questions, and then a couple where 2 individuals aligned on questions. But for the most part, there was just a list. I started to list out all the other questions that seemed to come up. So what I thought I would do is talk really about the first 2 slides, which represent where those majority pieces are. I have a recommendation. I don't think that there's enough that we can come to full consensus tonight, but I have an idea about how to kind of get there in time for the next meeting. So, I was so excited. I thought I do I'm a training guy for a living too. I don't know, you could just go to the next slide if you gotta. We'll pretend that I did that. All right, so, I do have a graduate degree in education, actually, so you think that I could. There we go. I think I'm live. So the two questions in blue are the questions where we had at least 4 individuals on the board aligned. So how well do the teaching styles of your child's teachers match your child's learning styles? And the other one is how comfortable is your child in asking for help from school adults? So those are 2 questions that we had a lot of feedback on. But I should share, by the way, that people did not thank you. People did not hold back. There was some criticism about the survey and the way the questions were constructed and things like that. And again, there was a lot of recommendations for some changes. But I just left these exactly as they are. And so the bottom line is, these seem to be areas that we may want to spend some time on. We also had 3 individuals who are focused with some passion on the question, in the past year, how often have you helped out at your child's school? I think that's driven by the 9% favorable thing. But again, there's a lot of commentary there about the way the question was constructed. And so there's some pieces there. So let me just keep going and then we can come back.
The plus and minus numbers, Mike, I forgot.
From 2016.
Oh, so the plus is the change from last year.
Correct,
Okay.
that's correct. Yeah, thanks, Ed. So this is the other slide. So 2 favorable. So this is the time where we had 2 individuals would agree on a question. And so how well do the activities at your child's school match their interests? How much of a sense of belonging does your child feel at his or her school? And then a couple others. How motivated is your child to learn the topics covered in class? How motivating are the classroom lessons in your child's school? And how well do administrators at your child's school create an environment that helps children learn? So again, this is one of the 2 slides that would be potential priority for the board, but we only have 2 individuals on the board agreed on these questions.
Yeah, that's
So,
amazing, how
yeah.
diverse we all were.
Really were.
Really, that's
really were.
basically.
And so I just, all this is out there public for your reading, but the other response of the next 3 notes, the next 3 slides, you can just read
So
them.
just one person brought these
Yeah,
up,
yeah,
right?
there's somebody pulled out this, so there's some questions about family engagement and learning behaviors. There's a couple of areas of grit and school fit, and then school safety. And so it is possible there's probably an error ratio here. There's a lot of commentary, and sometimes I get a very well constructed paragraph, and there'd be a question in the middle of the paragraph. So it is possible that I did miss one here or there. But I think it's important, from a process standpoint. I mean, folks may want to use this time to talk about why certain questions jumped out at them, and it's probably what we should spend some time on. There's a process here. It's a multi-voting process where we can take these 2 slides where there seemed to be a majority, so we go through a narrowing process. We say, okay, for these 2 slides where you had really 2 or more, everybody gets 3 votes, and you can put all 3 votes on one question, or you can spread them across, and I collect those again, and we come back at the end with a top 3 or 4, right? We do that. It's an HR thing. We do kind of a multi-vote thing. So there's a way for us to have narrowed this and then go further. But I'd say, Pauline, open it up to the board to kind of make their case and talk about. I could go back and forth and talk about. I'd focus on these 2 slides,
Yeah.
kind of the areas of focus.
Well, is there a reason we can't just say we want to monitor these 8 areas?
You could, but it's a very eclectic list, and because only 2 people agreed on this, I'm not sure that there's enough of a mandate for us to, I would say, for us to say that should make one of the 8. I think we probably want to do it. But
one comment before we embark on that discussion is that the questions are just, the survey and the questions that we get from the survey is a very non-flexible thing because of the way that, we want that to compare to other schools. We want to stick to what Panorama does and all that. And there's really no good fit with the things, the goals and the focus areas that we're all discussing are important for the school. So one of the things I tried to do was to try to, okay, we're saying these are climate and all these things that we're working on this year. What are the questions that match that? It was very hard to do because the questions, even, involvement from the parents, like you said, that's like, well, my kid doesn't talk to, or I don't talk to my kid's teacher more than once a year. Well, that might be a good thing, right?
Yeah.
So I know we talked about that last week. So I think we separate the conversation about picking a question just for the sake of tracking the question, and then making sure that we are tracking what's really important for progress that may not have anything to do with the questions.
I'll add to that as another example. So you had a colleague here who really spent some time digging into the comments, and their feedback was very heavily focused on grading practices, right? So there were a lot of comments about, not a lot, but there were some comments that had been pulled out about that some of the grading practices folks said were not uniform, the standards weren't as high as they used to be, that one teacher was not grading papers throughout the year, and so there's a lot of passion in the comments that do not necessarily map to a question. But the challenge here is, I think the driver for this activity tonight was, we're doing the survey year over year, we're reporting back, but we're missing some type of level of measurement where we could come back and say, geez, this moved up 26 points or 26 points compared to the previous year, but we haven't set as a benchmark, but 70% is where we want to be.
Right.
And so I think we're trying to get to a point when we're talking about this next year that we have a consistent measure of success in this survey, in these results. But I'm not sure it's a binary conversation. I think we can probably solve for that, so we can have a more productive conversation next year. And we could say, okay, are there other pieces that we could glean through the survey or the work that we're doing that we want to continue to work on and measure and monitor? But
if that's the case, why do we need to pick a number of, if we're going to conduct the survey anyway, all the questions will go out in the survey next year. we'll be tracking all the questions.
But we have no idea whether they're good. So for example, if we come back and we say, there's a question that says, I have to look at my glasses, but look at one of these questions. So it says, how well do the teaching styles of your child's teachers match your child's learning styles? This is at 46%. And next year it goes up to 60%. And we're saying, wow, that's great. We're up 14%. If we haven't set a benchmark saying we want to be at 75, then there's no way to really sit back and say we did it or we didn't do it. It's one person's opinion, but I'm just not sure. We could say as a board we just want to keep going northward, but I think it's probably a strong practice to come back and say we need to figure out what are the things that we care about and is there a measure that we can measure it against.
It'd also be useful to figure out what's behind the percentages, why parents select certain responses such as that, what exactly that mean. I mean, that's the 46%. Why doesn't a teaching style fit? What is meant by that? There's so much more to that question than that number. And before setting a percentage, it would be great to figure out exactly what parents mean when they select that.
Well, that's the other thing we can do, right, with this. We could focus on the two. Like, those are the two questions that had, or if you go back, those are the two questions, the school fit questions that 4 people said, right, that we had a lot of, we had consensus, not consensus, because we had 15 people, but we had a lot of people say those two were something to keep an eye out on. And, clearly this is, several board members are worried about this enough, and it's something that the school should probably really dig into. Right.
So the corporate America response to this would be to somehow narrow it down to a core set of questions,
Like 5,
and action plan on those questions, right? So you could set the target and then action plan against it, or you could action plan by bringing people together and saying, okay, how comfortable is your child in asking for help from school adults? What's really underneath that? What are the things that we're going to do to start to, if we believe that that's a behavior we really want to drive, what are the things that we need to do that will help support that? And what does success look like in the next 3 years? So we might come back and say, these are the 3 actions we're going to take this year. We hope in year 1 to get to 60%. We hope in year 2 we'll add some more stuff, get to 70, and our goal is by 2021 that we should be at 80%. For that.
Yeah, we really need to understand the question.
Yeah, that's the action planning
the
piece.
teaching style is is it the content of the teaching style? Is it the culture of the classroom?
Sure.
There's so many
That's
questions.
a lot to dig into.
Into that. So setting a number about teaching styles, there's so much more that needs to be known before doing that, and so being able to dig in, like you said, Mike, is really important.
Yeah, and by the way, I don't. It's not up to me, but I would never dismiss. I think the points that Raul was brought up, and what I heard from everybody in the emails is that it's, there's the comments and there's the unspoken pieces that are not in the survey that are of concern of folks, and there's a general consensus that if we do all these things right, that's not necessarily going to hit our overall goals. So I think. There may be, if we're going to do this activity, then maybe the answer is to open the door to say, are there, something like, grading practices or some of the other areas that we also want to action against.
Yep.
And we maybe can't measure it this way, but we want to measure it in a different way.
Yeah, and I think to your point on the action plan, one mistake would be to say, oh, we want to improve this question, let's do anything we can so that score gets improved.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Without thinking what are the implications of doing that. Because, there was a lot of comments about workload and
You're right.
homeworks, too much homework. So the easiest way to fix that question would be to reduce the amount of homework.
Yeah, no, you're right. No, he's absolutely right. I mean, I think there's some nuances here. But my takeaway from this is, we certainly have 2 questions where at least 4 people agreed, but we had 15 respondents.
Yeah,
and that means that there's a lot of folks that did not choose those questions, and it doesn't feel necessarily representative to them. So There's a lot of ways we can go here. We could still say, okay, let's dig in on this first page where at least we have, you know, a lot of things. I mean, there was not really a mandate here.
Yeah, that's
so I could help
very
narrow. I
interesting.
could help narrow it further if we
Yeah.
want to keep doing that. But I think what I would leave us with is, absent of doing something here,
Yeah.
you're in this real
Yeah, we're
strategy
in
of
this-
hope, which is you just hope that we'll just ride the wave of this new administration and all the enthusiasm, that the numbers are going to keep going up, but we'll never really be able to say, you know, are we where we want to be or where we need to be? We'll just keep seeing green and congratulate ourselves. But I think there's something, I think you want to measure in here. So I think that's what I would
Okay.
say to the board.
I think there's a couple struggles in here that I sort of hear from both the survey, is that if the number goes up, is it good?
Yeah, because the way some of the
I
questions
mean,
are.
Well, the first one, right, that is a
There
question.
are clearly questions that we as a board have debated about endlessly,
Like that first one.
like the first one, that
Mhm.
they're unclear whether it adds value or not.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think that's one thread I hear. Maybe something where we continue to use this tool as a survey tool so that we can baseline against other districts. But I sort of feel in reading some of the responses and hearing your comments that we need an AMSA-specific aspect to the survey to be able to dive into the things that we really care about, that the survey does not ask well.
I think there's, you know, the way we handle that at Thermo Fisher is we have 2 open-ended questions. Right, so year over year, we can try to quantify our progress and reaction plan and do the things we need to do, but these 2 open-ended questions each year gives us a chance to really focus on things that are super important to the mission of the company or the
What do
thing
you
that
mean
we're-
by an open-ended question?
you know, describe the top 3 things. You know, so
Oh, okay.
let's ride my thing. So let's say we decide as part of our new vision that we want to be a digital leader, like I said. So there could be a question there that says, as we consider our path to becoming a digital leader, you know, what are the 3 things that we need to do more of? What
I
are the
see,
you know,
okay.
there's ways to kind of focus in something that's very specific.
Okay.
Instead of a yes or no.
Correct.
Right.
Exactly.
But I was
Yeah.
wondering, don't we get that from the comments? I mean, we got a lot.
Well, but they're not.
But
But
they're
they're
not asked
free.
that way?
If you read the
Right.
comments, they
Yeah,
are a free
they're-
form
Yeah, that's
conversation
true.
Whereas
about
an
all the
open-ended
wonderful things. And
question will target
Yeah.
the types of responses
Yeah.
that you want
Yeah.
Right.
to get.
And you could say, you know, is there anything else you want to tell us? And that could
Yeah.
give people license
you
to
still
say
have
what
the
they want
open-
to say. But it's a, you know,
Yeah.
my read again is I think there's a lot of enthusiasm, well-deserved and well-earned enthusiasm for where things are going, but we're missing this dispassionate, data-driven, objective view of kind of how we're doing against specific goals.
I mean, I guess part of my hesitation here is I'm a little surprised at how disparate the board was on this, right? Like to ask for 4 or 5 and to have no consistency over kind of what people are.
Well, but I think
focusing
that's
is
more the
amazing.
questions fault, the
So-
survey's fault than.
Yeah,
than
it is. No,
us not
I think
agreeing.
that's true. I think that's.
So I'll give you an
true,
example,
but-
something I did, and I consider that extra credit, and you probably.
I'm
laugh.
going to
Oh,
go
you
there.
got extra credit.
So let me go to your.
Oh, is
Yeah,
that
but
his
that's
extra
that's
credit?
actually that's
I was gonna
less
ask what this
that's
was
less
about.
informative than the other thing. So I'll talk about that. But then I went through all 293 responses.
Yep.
So for the parents here, we read this stuff.
Yeah, we do read this stuff.
We do read this stuff, and I try to put them in buckets of recurring themes.
Yeah.
The number one biggest recurring theme, there was 64 of the 293, so that's close to 20%, right? It had to do with teacher, either quality, retention, or consistency. People concerned about there's great teachers, but there's others that are not that great, or there are teachers leaving. So some of those things might already be in the process of improving, but I know this is the family survey, not the teacher survey, which might be closer to that, but there's really no one question about that thing. But if there was one thing that we want to track
That
is
would
teacher
be-
retention, which is not a survey question, it's an HR KPI, right, that
Right.
we can track without the survey. But the quality, consistency, maybe that's another question. The other one, if we add up, I was putting these in 2 buckets, but then I thought maybe they're the same bucket, which is communication. So there were like 17 out of the 200 about having to do with teacher communication, and then like 15 having to do with overall communication with the school. So if you add those two up that are related to communication, that's 32 out of the 300, right? So 10% having to do with communication. There was no question specific to, other than how frequently do you talk to your teacher, which is one that we already
Which is
said
not a
it
good,
doesn't
yeah.
really add value. So it's hard to match the most important things in the comments to the questions in the survey, which is why this is such a hard thing to do. But it was very helpful to do it that way, because that tells us more of a story than the percentages and the, where we are in the percentiles and whatnot. And then the next one was Plus Portal. It's a lot of comments about consistency of use of Plus Portal, and is that where we're getting our homework and the grades and all that. So again, how do we track usage of Plus Portal, and how do we, is that a strategic decision that we're going to continue to invest in that platform, and the parents should continue to leverage it and the students should? That's not a question. There's not a Plus Portal question. So this is kind of the next level. That number, like those, whatever, how many buckets I came up with, that was one thing. This is what we use this a lot in big data type of applications that tag cloud, which basically it took every single comment and threw it into this website that takes in the most common words, and whatever's bigger is words that come up most frequently. And I got rid of some things like AMSA. AMSA showed up in there. So this is kind of curated list of questions. You see the biggest ones being teachers, students. Actually, I should have gotten rid of school. People are talking about the school. But, teachers and students are the most common thing, which, of course, the parents are talking about, the stakeholders, that, what's going to impact my students.
But respect was in there, I thought that was.
Help was big, improvements led, communication
obviously.
doesn't
Challenging.
quite stand out as much as, administration, I think, is a big word because of positive. It was next to positive things, right? So anyway, that's another way of seeing, looking at the comments. But again, how do you tie these to the questions?
Yeah, so good job on the extra credit, by the way.
Yes, he clearly gets extra credit.
I'll award the extra credit. One of the things that we've done with word clouds is you go back and you look at the charter, or you look at the mission of the school, and you say, are the words in the mission coming up here? And if they're not, then we're not doing enough to market and communicate or design the types of solutions that support them. Sometimes it can be some type of a indicator of how aligned we are. Or you think about, it might be fun to see next year, Dr. Lewis, you're so consistent in how you talk about the school and the things that are important to you.
Like, would that show
and you
up?
may start to see some of those words start to appear next year and things like that. But there's another way to use this word cloud. It's just kind of interesting. So I don't know, Pauline.
Yeah,
I think that
feel
there's a
about
lot here. Like I said, for me, I don't
Yeah.
think it's a binary piece. I
No,
think that we have
clearly
kind of
not.
folks here that feel that, if we do all this stuff right, we're not necessarily addressing all the important things.
Right.
I am in the camp that if we're gonna put the community through a survey every year, we need some type of that dispassionate, data-driven kind of baseline that we can measure some type of effectiveness on.
I mean,
So
this
think
is
it's
one
about-
of many inputs,
Yeah.
right, of the things that we come up with. Obviously, teacher retention comes up a lot. Well, that's like one of Dr. Lewis's 4 major goals
Sure.
for the year, right? So, I mean, that comes out in other places. This is just sort of input to help inform us. I think this is just that next level of what of all of this do we really want to keep an eye on in particular? And I mean, a little bit, I guess, what I'm gathering from this is I'm not sure we all agree. Like, right, clearly we don't all agree. This is the reason why we need to go through our strategic planning exercise, because we are all over the place. No wonder, like, the rest of the community is all over the place too. Because the things that this board around this table thinks are important, that we should be monitoring, are not, we don't all agree on 3 things.
Yeah, I'm in that same place, and it almost, to me, at least everything that's been reflected, individually, we all think it's important, we're just not aligned. So maybe there's this, mechanism of having a discussion to see if we can't get alignment in sort of appendizing and narrowing down because we're only gonna be able to focus on, so many things anyway.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So maybe through discussion, we can get alignment if we put all of them up and then, now, today we don't have as many board members reflected here as we would probably want to have
Right.
a discussion.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking that might be the next step.
Yeah, I mean.
We gotta affinitize.
And try to get down to the 5.
Yeah.
I mean, we could also, as part of that, we could decide to pick a category. So we could say 2018 is going to be about school fit. And so, we would look at all the indicators according to the survey of school fit, and are there certain areas in there that we want to focus on, and we just get narrow, and then we say, okay, next year will be about safety. It'll be about bullying, and so but I think, to Ev's point, I think probably people need to come prepared to talk about something, but we're going to have to bring some order to it. It's a really
Yeah,
scattered
it's all over.
kind of survey.
Yeah. Well, I think part of the survey things are really for the school leadership, like learning behaviors is not, we're not going to have anything necessarily say on that other than say, yes, we want to monitor this, but this is, clearly the administration would have to figure out what they want to do with this information, right? So that's partially, part of this is what is important for us to have them look at versus, things that are more
Sure.
strategic.
Sure.
So I think that's one challenge with this particular survey as well, that it serves the purpose of, it's not, I'm actually not sure it's a board level survey or if it's actually a school level survey, right? So that's, we're just, at the board level, our charter says we are supposed to be doing sort of parental satisfaction, maybe not all these things, because that really is for the school. I think it's very useful information for the school to find this, right? If you think that, only 47% of people are saying their child is comfortable talking to an adult at the school, that's concerning. So, but that's something they have to figure out, right? So it does give that amount of useful information. I don't know, so we haven't heard from this side as much. I'd like to hear from this side.
Yeah, no,
what
it's
you
something I've
think
been
about
thinking
this.
that as a board, I think it's hard to pick ones that would be, like, we could do something about as a board.
As a
I
board,
guess,
right,
yeah, like
yeah.
the school climate and school safety are the two that jump out at me, but those aren't the ones that came up on the ones that we all picked out, or some of us picked out. So, but yeah, like, so, as a teacher, learning behaviors
Right,
and grit
exactly.
really stood out to me.
Yeah.
And then the one you just mentioned too, that's not really my experience as a teacher. I feel like students are very comfortable asking questions, so I was
That's
surprised
why it's
by that
very
percentage.
interesting. Yeah, that's why those sorts of things I think are interesting for the school to see.
Yep.
Because clearly, I don't think we or you would have guessed that number would be
Right.
that low.
And the comments don't always back these up, right?
Oh,
So
that's
if you looked
interesting.
at that question,
Yeah.
if you look at that question and say, geez, this is a source of concern, there's not necessarily a ton of commentary that supports that as an urgent issue. It's like, it's hard to, that's another hard piece here.
Yeah. I do think it would be worth considering either rewriting questions or doing, like someone said, a more AMSA-specific one, because I don't know if it does really reflect our needs
Yeah.
and what we're interested in measuring too. And then especially once we move forward with the strategic planning and identifying a vision for the future, I think having a survey that aligned with that more and aligned with assessing if that vision was being met in some way would maybe be more appropriate and maybe a better use of parents' time in filling this out than our time in analyzing it too.
Could the board agree to just a thought, maybe a set number of questions from the larger survey, and then based upon that, add further questions, open-ended questions. Here are 6, 7 questions that we really think are fundamental, but we want to dig deeper into those really important questions. So if you have the same end of your survey, perhaps in the middle of the year, you have a much more in-depth survey on things that really pop out, to provide greater feedback and context for each of these.
Yeah, I'll say one last thing on that. If the evaluation process taught me anything, there's something very unique and special about this school, and it's really important to get it right. And I think that part of the argument for sticking with these questions is the ability to benchmark and things like that, but we don't spend any energy benchmarking.
Yes.
Right? We spent all of our energy looking at year-over-year results. And so if we were to decide as a board that we're not really concerned about benchmarking, what we really want to do is figure out kind of what is the story, the key fabric of this school, and how does that map to the vision and how the mission and all the other pieces that we talked about, then we could probably, like the team built the evaluation, you could probably construct a short survey, 20, 25 question survey that goes after the things that are important to us and not try to worry about benchmarking against other institutions.
I think especially given everything that's happened in the past year, and if we are, clearly I think we are at the beginning or kind of in the middle now of a fresh start for the school. Is it even worth it to benchmark, on a kind of a bad path?
We spend no energy going back.
You're right. We never.
And I would bet, frankly, that even if we started benchmark, that a lot of folks around this table and here tonight would dismiss those things that we're benchmarking at because it doesn't represent what's important to us, what we're trying to do.
Yeah, it's actually true.
So it's kind of, it's grounded in the wrong
It kind of is
criteria.
For us. It's very interesting because, this morning we had the Board on Track session that they had when the board CEO relationship. And actually one of the things I said was, actually we spent many years trying to get the ED right and, figuring out, okay, here's our job description, the 25 years of educational administration experience. And we finally, I think when we got it right was when we threw that out and said, why are we trying to find, right, what is the right, school superintendent list of, the 25 years experience, because that's not what AMSA needs, right? And we tried to sort of figure out, okay, what is it that we really want? We want to build trust, we want to build transparency, we want someone who can collaborate, we want someone who can listen. Then it became a lot more obvious, right? And so maybe that is absolutely right, that why are we trying to benchmark?
Right.
Yeah.
I do think the year over year is important.
Yeah, if we could get a survey, right. So maybe there's a couple options on the table. So one is to stick with the survey, identify a couple items that we want to focus on and action plan on them and do it. Or create a survey committee that's a combination of all the different stakeholder groups, which seems to be a good process that works, that allows the teachers to respond and focus on things that are important to them and the families that are important to them, and find a mechanism to get that right and start anew with a new way of measuring our success against the things that are important to us.
And we've tried this survey for 3 years, and we have this same circular conversation every year. Every year, we all get stuck on that first question, and it's like, we don't know what it means. So why are we doing it if it doesn't give us useful information?
Right. This board is aligned more than it's not.
Exactly.
And the fact that 15 individuals at best were able to come up with, most
But like
people
I said,
come
that's
up.
the question's fault.
Yeah,
Exactly, you're saying, but that's right. I think this is the survey.
We're solving a different problem by maybe creating our own survey.
Mike, I really like your proposal.
I really do too.
I'd be glad to help with it.
Now, on the benchmarking thing, I can't say that this was a really deep analysis that I did, but I actually looked in the things that look bad, like lower numbers, percentage-wise.
Yeah.
We were actually in the higher percentiles anyway.
Right.
So, and that kind of shows the way the question is construed.
Right.
Especially the one that we keep talking about, how frequently you're talking to a teacher. Well, nobody's talking to their teacher every week. So that percentile-wise, we were great because everybody's answering the same question. It's like, no, that's not, whatever they consider favorable was not. But there were, the parts that I think were a little more helpful was the maybe demographic or grade-specific questions, which would still get that even if we don't do, that's not benchmarking to other schools. That I guess kind of slicing and dicing. I forget, there was one that, I think that was the teaching styles one. There was a significant difference between free and reduced lunch answers and not. So it was like 46% and for overall, and then 22% for free and reduced lunch. So again, I don't want to jump into conclusions, but is the teaching style for underserved population
More of it.
harder, or should we adapt more to that? But again, that's not benchmarking to other schools. That's just asking that question
That's
about
for
free and
us.
reduced lunch, and we can
Yeah, it's
include that in
taking
our.
a deeper dive on
Yeah.
what we see there.
I mean, the other piece, if you dig into those, you could also look at Dr. Lewis's core indicators, right? The creation of a safe and supportive school environment, collaboration, for the faculty survey around staff development and new teacher growth. And I mean, there may be a way for us to bring alignment between kind of that set of things, the things that our administration is trying to drive,
Yeah, I think
the
that
work
makes
that we're
so
trying to
much
do
sense.
from a strategy standpoint,
Yeah.
that kind of bring all these things together instead of all these disparate pieces. I mean, you've been very clear in terms of the 6 things you're trying to
Exactly.
focus on.
Right.
Right? And each board meeting, you keep going back to the same things you're trying to drive. So why should we be figuring out what's the impact of
Yeah,
families and
both.
teachers? I mean, it's
Put my feet to the fire.
Well,
Yeah.
do the parents feel like at the end of school year that their child has more spirit than they did last year,
Yeah.
right? Like, that's not going to show up in these.
and I'm getting to know you. I'm sure you want to know,
Yes,
right? I mean, I think so.
Positively, yeah.
Yeah. So I think so.
So I think we
That would
kind
be
of are,
wonderful.
I think we've just decided to throw out the panorama
Yeah.
survey.
Finally.
So I don't know where to go from here. I mean,
I mean,
think there seems to be some
one other
consensus
thing I
on
would
it.
say about Panorama, in addition to the benchmarking, the other reason we did it was there was concern at the time that administration was filtering the answers.
Yeah, it's distrust.
Because of the distrust. So, I mean, we could go back to just SurveyMonkey and assume that, maybe that we'll get clear enough answers. We can say that it's going straight to, the board, so that it wouldn't get filtered in any way. I mean, that may help with that it's a third party, as opposed to a pure third-party organization.
That's a good point.
So that was the only
You're
other
right.
reason that we went with Panorama, because it was anonymous and it was very clear that it was anonymous.
Yeah, you're right.
But I don't know if that's as much of an issue, so.
Yeah, I think having it filter to the board would be a good solution to that.
Okay.
That, yeah, it would come from the board and go back to the board. I think that would
Then that would solve
it.
that problem.
And it would be tremendously helpful to
And yeah, I
have
know
that
you are.
alignment between what we have said a lot and whether we are actually true to our word or not.
So I heard Roger say that he'd be willing to serve on sort of a survey committee to sort of help.
I can't lead it. I'll participate in it.
Okay.
though. I mean, I'll actively participate. I just want to.
And I mean, I wonder, this is just sort of and I'm not asking, I am asking, but
Jean
just
should
a
be in it.
suggestion. No, actually, my suggestion was actually to have Brianna and Liz.
Oh, great.
Just
Okay.
as stakeholders,
Yeah.
is what I'm wondering.
I just think there's
But-
I just want to say like there are some folks who wrote. They were very passionate in
Should those very
their homework.
passionate people?
And so I just
Okay,
want
and
to make sure that we
Raul
don't
got extra
exclude,
credit.
exclude people who
No, and I gotta
I
say,
have to say.
but I think we should be inclusive. more
Well,
than
I'd like to
exclusive.
see more parent involvement, so I definitely have input on that,
Mhm.
so.
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
and a little bit, not to over-explain the extra credit part of it, but I was trying to be analytical of what was in front of me, which was the results and the comments, just because I'm not as close to the schools as a lot of you guys are. So I have less of a first-hand experience of what the school is on a day-to-day basis, and that's why I did
helpful
the extra
to go
credit
through
for
that.
it.
That was
to
super
learn-
helpful.
No,
to
that's
be,
true.
analytical about it, so it's.
And we've done that in the past too. We've gone through and like tried to group them into themes, and it's, there's slightly different themes every year that emerge. Before it was about retention entirely, right?
And maybe
So-
there are questions. I mean, I think we should look to the world to see if there are well-written questions that we want to use and draw from. We just won't be bound to a single piece.
Okay.
So Pauline, where do we go from here?
So I think we go from here. We've got did Roger, you say you'd be willing to help, to lead or to?
I would prefer to help. I think I've got enough on my plate. I don't think I can take on leadership at
Okay.
this point.
So Raul, could you lead, or you want to lead, or do we want one of the stakeholder reps to lead? Anyone have one?
I'll lead it. But I need help. I need help from.
Okay.
Unless somebody wants to jump in. If anybody wants to jump in and lead, you want to? Okay. I mean,
Co-lead.
Mike
I
and Raul
jumped in
will
because
co-lead.
it got quiet, but if somebody else wants to lead,
Okay,
they're welcome to.
Mike
do.
and Raul will co-lead, and we've got Roger, Jill, Brianna on
Know
the
that.
task force. And of course,
That's
and
right.
it's gonna be with the school leadership as well.
Great.
You'll tell us who you want on. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, Jill and Brianna.
Yeah, no, I'll participate.
Oh,
as
there you
well.
go. Okay.
Yeah.
Almost have a whole board then.
not a committee, it's a team.
Task force.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all. Board self-assessment, we are going to defer because not everybody completed that homework. But
Polly, can I just say, so how about we commit between now and the next board meeting that we'll
At least
meet
have
at
one.
least once and come up with a proposal on kind
Yes,
of what this
yes,
plan will
please
look
do
like.
that. Yeah,
So we'll
yeah.
just come in with
You'll
a
work on
plan
it.
for the next meeting, something like
Yeah.
that.
Okay, that sounds good. So board self-assessment, I am going to defer because not everyone did get a chance to, to complete that. Most people did, but we didn't have everybody, and there was enough divergence as the things were coming in that I think it is worth having the full participation before we have that discussion. I do want to have it for sure at the next board meeting because I would like to have it done before our DEIS meeting. So that's going to get deferred until the November meeting, all right? So we'll go through committee updates quickly. Governance.
So we've already covered secretary nomination.
Yep.
At the governance committee, we discussed board recruiting and came up, part of the
In
primary
packets.
goal of our discussion was to identify candidate attributes for board members that we're recruiting for. We're clearly recruiting for at least one, and it's always nice to have some people on deck for the future. And if I can, when I
Actually, if
find-
you can find it, we can project. That'll be easier. It's the last, yeah, it's the last page of this. It's the stapled page, Board of Trustees role description. It's the last page, but you can also, I think if you project, it'll be easier to see. Should be desired candidate profile, should be there somewhere.
Role description.
Is it at the top?
Oh, that's the
That's the
process.
process slide. The process slide is just in here to remind everyone that that's what our process is. So we're in stage one for this year, which is that the governance committee develops the desired profile.
All right, I lost the webpage.
Yeah, get out of that and go down to the Chrome.
We have it in front of us. I
Oh,
know.
okay.
All
yeah.
right. Role description.
Yeah, so it's in that role description. It's the last page. It was stapled to the role description.
Okay, back page, this draft on it. We discussed this at governance, and we sort of surveyed the skills and attributes of our current members, and we came up with, I think, these are the professional experience desired, but I think it's sort of, I'd say that our discussion was that first we're looking for the quality. The qualities override. We're looking for these 4 qualities, and we agree that they have not changed in at least 3 years. And second, now once we identify people that have these qualities, that the areas or gaps, possible gaps that we identified among the board is the following: college/university faculty or administration experience, including admissions officers or other people working at the college level. Continued need for development/fundraising and education, community engagement, particularly looking for additional people who are working in a STEM corporation. And finally, big picture facilities issues, experience, especially architect/discussion, construction. So that's what we came up with. Are we missing anything or thoughts?
Yeah, thoughts on this?
I think I covered most of it.
I mean, just to clarify, that STEM corporation was, I mean, we obviously have a lot of people who work at STEM corporations, but we don't have anyone whose job is primarily like educational outreach or community outreach, right? So that was the goal, to try to find those people. Okay.
So I think so this is gonna become the governance recruiting template. If you are aware of people who would be interested in joining the board, please
That's what we're looking
contact Pauline or myself, and we can begin the process.
Each year, we're probably looking for 2 or 3 people.
And the final thing that we're going to be discussing in next governance meeting is the yearly calendar for the Board of Trustees. We've identified various tasks, and we want to revive and update that calendar for this year. And that's it for governance.
Okay. Ed Committee.
I will shorten this up, and what I'll do is I'll just send you the full debrief. But in October, we continue to look at the AMSA AP results as well as the MCAS results. Our plan is, once the embargo is lifted, we will be looking specifically at the 2017 results and seeing where the trends are. In terms of forward-looking, based on our feedback from all of you last month, we are looking forward to seeing the departments present their achievements to the board. Next year, we figure that will probably begin in February.
Okay.
And we would like to suggest that there's wider community, both from parents and teachers, participating in those meetings so that they can see what's going on with the department chair presentations. In terms of the topics for the presentation, some of the areas that we want to focus on, and we will develop a template for their use, is vision of success, strategies to achieve the vision, alignment of resources to support the strategies, measures for success, and any needs and priorities, specifically asks of the board. So the agenda and schedule is in the hands of the administration, and I know Ms. Lindsay and Dr. Lewis both have already started to prep the department chairs, and they seem to be very excited to be participating. So hopefully that will continue.
So February, March, April, May, June.
Yeah, so that was sort of the plan.
Okay.
We'll slip into July if we have to, but.
All right.
And then the one other thing is, we also discussed a little more around Trustees Day. This is going to be taken up more in November, just the whole idea of what it would look like. We're also looking that this would probably not happen until the March timeframe. So again, it would be far out so that people can put it on their calendar if they can participate. At the very least, it will give both the board and the teachers a framework for what it could look like to have people coming into their classrooms to visit. And also, just at our next meeting, again, around some of the test scores and where we're at, we will be doing a deeper dive on some of the subgroups and demographic changes, especially as it pertains to our test results.
So you will need time next month to present that? Or you're planning to do it in Ed Committee?
We're going to do it in Ed Committee, and then depending obviously on what we find, we may have a broader presentation for next month.
Okay. May have a broader presentation. Okay. So you'll let me know. So when it comes out, I just want to allot time for that discussion if we're going to have it. Okay. Do we have any other topics that people want to discuss in open session? No? I want to do a quick meeting effectiveness check, because we haven't done that in a while. Did people think we were spending the right amount of time talking about more strategic things this time? I mean, we didn't talk about uniforms once.
Well, I think specifically, given that we had the financial as well as,
Yeah.
you know,
The strategic planning.
I think that absolutely.
I would concur with
And we threw out the panorama
I
survey.
think that was the best decision of the night.
Rick's gonna be devastated. He'll never miss a meeting again.
I know, right? All right. In that case, I would entertain a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of discussion litigation strategies and consider the purchase and lease of real property.
So moved.
Okay, Roger made a motion.
Second.
Liz seconded. And we have to do roll call vote. So Jean?
Yes.
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 Yes?
Yes.
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 Lucy?
Yes.
All right, we're going to call, actually, it's just you on the line, so do you want me to just call your cell phone?
That'd be great.
Okay, we'll just call you when we're assembled in the room. Okay. Yeah, so we are also going to invite in Dr. Lewis, Ms. Lindsay, and Lisa O'Connor. It's executive session, okay? And Lucy will be joining by phone. Okay, thanks all.
Thank you.